I think that, first of all, I have to do a disclaimer similar to what Nikki did. I am not the expert on sort of analyzing US energy policy. I focus on particular areas of certain things, but overall, sort of as a comprehensive policy, I don't do that work on a regular basis. But what I will say about US energy policy is, first off, I'll say this. I think that what we think of when you think of a coordinated, comprehensive policy, in the United States, we don't have that around our energy production, energy use, and so forth and so on. The things that govern US energy production, US energy use, and so forth are in very different places within sort of code and policy regulation and executive orders from the president and a variety of different places. And so to say that we have a comprehensive, holistic US energy policy is a bit of a misnomer. That said, I want to outline for you some of what I think are the key elements of the existing US energy policy. But even before I do that, I want to make one particular mention of something that Leslie Fields brought up earlier in her really fabulous presentation, and that is the issue of energy reduction. And that is not something that you find too much emphasis on in terms of our policy. And I think that's a really tremendous problem, because often when we think about sort of our energy use, energy mix, where we get our energy sources from, that plays a very significant backseat to the policy wonks and the thinking that goes on in a place like Capitol Hill. We talk about renewables, we talk about getting more renewables, we talk about renewable portfolio standards and a variety of different things. We talk about oil and gas, we talk about coal, we talk about nuclear, we talk about hydro, and a variety of other things as well, but we very seldom are very clearly focused on how do we really take our energy consumption and dial it back in pure, clear, and significant ways. So parts of the energy policy that I wanted to sort of outline for you and let you know that are existing are, we clearly have an emphasis or a significant portion of our energy policy that looks at sort of coal. I mean, coal is a very significant resource in the United States, and much of our energy policy does sort of focus, to the extent that it exists, does focus on how do we sort of expand our reliance and support on coal, which, as you heard some of us say, is one of the dirtiest forms of power generation. Our policy does tend to lean pretty heavily, and here I am editorializing a little bit on coal for power generation. We use about 49% of our generation capacity is coming at, electrical generation capacity is actually coming from coal. And I think that over the next 20 years, we are in many ways going to probably see a continued and sustained sort of presence of coal in our electrical generation mix. Another key thing that has sort of popped up in our energy policy and plan over the years has been sort of drilling in the Arctic refuge. It is a source of access to oil that many of the energy companies are very focused on, and their supporters on Congress are saying that that should become a part of our national energy policy and mix, and that having access to drilling in the Arctic refuge is something that has been bandied about and is something that should be opened up. Now, again, in my role of trying to be fair and balanced about this, when the passions do get inflamed when we talk about the Arctic National Life Refuge. It is a significant portion of the part of the northern slopes of Alaska. But when they do talk about drilling there, it's not talking about drilling in the entire Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. There are places within that very large expanse of land that is where the focus of drilling actually is on. Our energy policy also does focus on drilling in the outer and continental shelves of the United States. After the BP oil spill, obviously that took a particular turn and had an impact on sort of forward progression in terms of drilling in the outer continental shelf. But that remains a significant part of how we want to move forward in terms of our energy policy. Another piece of our energy policy is really this idea of drilling on public lands. So there are vast sections of our country that are held under public trust and domain, and the idea of opening many of those up for oil and natural gas exploration is a significant portion and focus of the energy policy as it stands right now. Electrical power is also a very significant portion of our energy policy, looking at sort of our grid, which is in a very bad state of affairs. But really, much of what our energy policy does is sort of invites the oil, utility, and coal industries, along with the Department of Energy and other agencies, to sort of, I think, begin to sort of like tackle the Clean Air Act, and we are in the midst of a very significant rollback of this nation's most important, I would contend, environmental policy, and the only one that actually is connected to public health in its written form in law, that requires the agencies to actually take into consideration public health impacts. And because of sort of our need for electrical power in this country, you find that the Clean Air Act is under assault, but this whole piece of electrical power and power generation is also a part of what could be considered our energy policy. Okay, stop. Fuel economy for vehicles is another key part of our energy policy. Nuclear power, there are all these provisions around nuclear power. Oil refineries, focus on oil refineries, we've talked a little bit about that, it's very significant. Reformulated gasoline, so you get into this whole thing around ethanol and putting, mixing the blends between the winter and the summer is also a part of our energy policy. And then lastly, renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecil.
Okay.